every player talks about a lack of accountability in the building. And to me, that just resonates as their culture doesn't have accountability in it. And that starts and ends with the head coach.
1978 defensive playbook, Orange Crush, improvement areas. We're talking about consistency. We're talking about turnovers, right? We're talking about the turnover ratio.
I think they know, we all know that won't last. You can't keep turning the ball over and expect to win.
Welcome to Coach. I'm Patricia, and this is Coach Bill Belichick. Coach, before we get into the show, big weekend this past weekend here for the service academies, well, at least for two of the three.
Yeah, Army and Navy 5-0 for the first time since 1945, so 80 years. Great to see them both doing well.
We're rolling towards a big game here for the Commander-in-Chief trophy.
Right, long way to go, but great to see the service academies off to a great start this year, and we'll see how they do as the competition unfolds for the rest of the season.
Yeah, it'll be great. Go Navy. Coach, theme of the week this week, self-scout, self-evaluation. We've got enough games in the system now. We've got 4 or 5 games in. We can really take a look at ourselves, find out what we're doing well, what we're not doing so well. Big week for teams to kind of try to improve. Big
week for the teams and a big week for us to look back. We talked about some things early in the season and to see how some of those things are turning out.
Yeah, certainly are some good, some not so good before the season, but that's what everyone does. Before it kicks off, we never know what direction it's going to go. But, you know, a lot of people talk about self-scout. You know, we try to put the keys to what self-scout means. And, you know, these are the things we always talked about. And you always said, you know, look, we got to be honest. We got to be honest with what we're looking at and talk about some of these points.
Be honest and see what's going right and what's going wrong. Don't kid yourself. And don't make up your mind on what you want the results to look like. Be honest and try to figure it out. And then once you identify it, what are you going to do to fix the problem? That could be a personnel decision. That could be a scheme decision. That could be the way you practice or maybe the way you run meetings to help prepare better for the problems that you're having. But it's hard to think that problems are going to get any better or get fixed if you don't do something to address it.
Yeah, you got to adjust, and we just want to make sure we're doing whatever we can to help the team win. You know, it's what do we do best to help the team win? You know, kind of everybody check their egos at the door at that point, and
yes.
You know, how do we improve? And that's really the best way for us to take a look at the self-scout as we go. I think one of the biggest things that we talk about, you know, every single week besides points, that is an easy self-scout is really the turnovers. What does that look like? The turnover ratio, the plus minus, how much are you giving the ball away versus how much are you taking it away?
Well, we all know that the number one correlation to winning and losing games is points, and the next correlation to winning and losing games is turnovers. If you can be on the plus side of turnovers in any given game, it increases your chances of winning. And this year, 41-13 for the plus turnover teams. As you would expect, when the turnovers are even, the games are even, equal wins and equal losses. But 41-13 for the plus turnover teams, or 13-41 for the minus turnover teams, however you want to look at it. The other thing is, if you don't turn the ball over at all, 75% chance to win. So if you want to win and you want to improve your record and you want to make some strides, don't turn the ball over.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Job security, ball security, all of those catchphrases that we say all the time. But that's our game changer this week. So, well, let's take a look at the top, you know, teams that are doing a great job of, you know, getting the ball, the turnover differential. You can see those teams usually have winning records. You know, we're still a little bit early in the season. We've got some time to go here as far as the records playing out. But I think when these teams continue to do well, taking care of the ball on offense, turn it over on defense, and have that plus ratio, certainly they're winning games.
Right. This turnover differential right here, +7, +4. Every team has a winning record. The Chargers are 2-2. So it's not really that hard to figure out. Ball security is job security. Turnover differential correlates more to winning than everything except points.
Right. And then, you know, on the flip side of that, we look at, you know, the negative part of it. Who's turning the ball over? How is that affecting the team? And I think it's pretty clear here, if you turn the ball over, you can't win in these situations. And the records reflect that for really the bottom teams.
The one exception to that stat is the Chiefs this year. They're -4 in turnovers and 5-0. I think they know, we all know that won't last. You can't keep turning the ball over and expect to win. They've been able to get by with it a couple times in some close games. There's nothing more important than taking care of the ball, keeping the defense on a long field, making your opponents drive it, and the teams that do that well are winning more than the teams that don't.
Yeah, this is the number one thing. If you're one of these teams that's turning the ball over, you're going to address it with the team. You know, you've walked into that meeting room plenty of times and said, hey, we got to stop turning the ball over. We got to get more turnovers on defense. Special teams plays a role in this too. I know it doesn't factor into the differential ratio, but, you know, getting blocked kicks, stops on fourth down, all of that plays into it too. And look, it's the easiest thing to kind of address. You put it up on tape and say, hey, we got to fix these issues. Here's where we're going to improve, whether it's practice or points of emphasis, whatever that may be. But this is the first place to start as far as the self-scout is concerned.
Yeah, it's a total team effort. It's the coaches, it's the players. It's not only the guys that handle the ball, it of course is them, but it's also the guys that protect blitz pickup, offensive linemen, things like that, where those people, if they don't do their job, they can cause turnovers, strip sacks, batted balls, quarterback getting hit as he throws for an interception, things like that. So I think once those things are really committed to as a team to understand how important it is to protect the ball and to do everything possible to protect the ball and take advantage of every turnover opportunity, whether it's recovering a fumble, intercepting a pass, and not dropping it, and as you said, getting into the block kicks and so forth, which are also part of the whole turnover equation. And I would say momentum in the game. There's not enough emphasis on that. No matter how much emphasis you put on it, there's always room for more. It's just critical.
And, you know, you said it to begin, just be honest, right? Be honest with it. I think when you talk turnovers, too, one of the things we would always talk about is, you know, what are just offenses giving the ball away? What are just bad plays that we got to eliminate, you know, fumbled snaps, miscues, things that similar to we talk about pre-snap penalties, as opposed to, hey, these are really good plays where the defense is just taking the ball away. It's a good technique play where they've turned it over. You know, there's a difference there, and I think those are things that you can clean up if you're honest with yourself about, hey, we just can't give the ball away and, you know, put ourselves in a hole like that. I think we can take a look at that.
You bet. Yeah, giving away the ball is like giving away games. It's a really one and the same.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good place to start with self-scout is just the turnover ratio, that conversation they're having in the buildings right now. There's enough games in. And, you know, if you can really clean this up, you can really help yourself have a chance to win here going forward. Okay, turning into, you know, a little bit of predictions, a little bit of conversation we had before the season started, Coach, our own self-scout, if you will.
Right.
We'll start out west. We'll start with the AFC West and some comments that we made before the season started. You can look at the standings here right now. I think we both agreed that the Chiefs would be at the top of the division here. We did make some comments and thought Denver would be, you know, someone that would improve, and the Chargers and the Raiders with new coaching staffs trying to figure out where they would be in this division. But some good comments from us. Maybe we'll take a look at it, throw ourselves out there a little bit, and critique ourselves as we talked about these teams before the season.
All right, let's do it. Sean, you know, is very committed to Bo Nix. I think that's a great pick. You know, Bo Nix was a very productive quarterback at Oregon. He did a good job in distributing the ball, very high completion percentage, good decision maker. In that offensive system, they didn't throw the ball down the field a lot, but when they did, you know, Nix was accurate, and he has a good arm. I don't think he can't not do it. He just wasn't asked to do it very often. I think he's going to be okay there. He's a smart kid, can handle the line of scrimmage. I think there's a lot to like.
Well, we got 5 games in on him, Coach. What do you think?
Well, not perfect, but it looks like he's getting better every week and certainly gained a lot of confidence from his head coach, Sean Payton. Sean's done a good job of managing Bo Nix, and Nix has done a better job of protecting the ball, making good decisions, and giving their defense a chance to help them, and they've gotten some big plays out of their defense. So that's the quarterback's job, is to figure out the way to win, and it's complementary football.
Yeah, I think you were spot on with Bo Nix. You might have had some inside intel there, I think, after the draft from Coach Payton, but I think we're seeing what we thought we'd see out of him.
Yeah, that's right.
With Vance Joseph and that defense, I think that's one thing that, you know, they started to trend in that right direction last year, and I think that's what Vance is really going to want to build on. What they were able to do in the first 5 games last year, which wasn't very good, but really, again, the improvement is what we're looking for in the last 5 games, you know, under 28 points per game in 4 out of the 5, over 28 points to start the season on 4 out of 5, so they flipped it. They're winning some games on defense right now, Coach.
Yeah, they really are. They've done a good job. They're starting to gel and have a lot of confidence, communication, and playing pretty good as a team. So if they can keep that going, they don't have to score as many points.
They went in last year and they kind of started off a little bit slow, and they went to self-scout mode. You know, we talked to them after the season, and they just made some adjustments defensively, and I think they're continuing to do that into this year, and it's really paying off.
Nobody works harder than Mahomes, which is a great thing when your quarterback is, you know, has that kind of not only leadership but work ethic. You know, that forces everybody to keep up with him. I think if anybody has a chance to do it, you know, it's the Chiefs, but it's going to be tough. I'll tell you, it's going to be tough.
Well, you know, we love it. We've obviously, Coach, you got some time to spend with Mahomes in the offseason. You know, we mentioned it last week, the quote he comes out with, even though they're winning, the amount of pressure. I mean, great player, and when your star player holds himself to that high standard, I think everyone's got to follow along.
Yes, and I think his humility, which is the mark of a great leader, his humility, his work ethic, his drive, and really his team attitude. You can feel it when you're not on the team, and I'm sure it's very powerful when you're actually in Kansas City. Between Andy Reid, the coaching staff, Mahomes, Kelsey, Chris Jones. They got a lot of positive things out there. It's still going to be hard, but they got a lot of things going for them.
Mahomes gets out. We've got 3 guys on Kelsey because we know the ball's going to him. So we plaster him. It's a high throw. Kelsey goes up, sees that he's got 3 guys on him, and basically bats the ball down to the running back who's coming in crossed in front of him that we've completely dropped in coverage at this point because the plays, why would we? We know it's going to Kelsey. Has enough awareness to bat it to him. He takes off. It's 30 yards. And the guys are looking at me like, well, how do we stop that? I don't know. That's, it's, you can't, those plays, those are the ones that frustrate you, but that's what makes them so dangerous.
Those 2 guys are still a big reason why Kansas City's having success.
They are. And that play where Kelsey did that to us, to the running back, and again, no answers in that situation. That was the first time they had kind of done that. That was about 5 years ago. But then again, we saw it this past week. He catches one over the middle. Everyone thinks we got him. He flips it underhand to the running back. Now we can say whether that was a design play or not, but these are just guys on the same page. This is impossible when that stuff starts to happen. Now you're playing assignment football. You got to stay with your guy. You shouldn't be tackling another guy. This becomes a real problem. Yeah, 2 great places out in the West, the AFC West here, Kansas City, Denver, another fun atmosphere. You mentioned the fans in Denver. Coach, I walked over to the library. I got the 1978 defensive playbook, Orange Crush defense here, self-scout. The funniest part about this book as I was flipping through, very first, page, improvement areas. We're talking about consistency. We're talking about turnovers, right? We're talking about the turnover ratio. We're looking at the 1978 stats where we were the year before. Now, this was a good defense now, right? I mean, this got the fans going out there for sure. And then right there, statistical goals. All right, how do we increase our turnover ratio, attack the ball? I love looking at these old books, but tell us about the Orange Crush, the environment out there in Denver. I mean, it really started here, I think, in the late 70s.
Yeah, it really did. Joe Collier was the defensive coordinator. He did a great job with that defense, developing a 3-4 that had some very unique features to it. Outstanding group of linebackers, Jackson and Swenson outside, Rizzo and Gradishar inside, very good nose guard, Carter, Alzado, and Barney Chavis at defensive end, Billy Thompson, Foley, great safeties, Louis Wright, one of the best corners in the league. They really had a good football team, and defensively they were all tied in together. Generated a lot of excitement in the stands. And Old Mile High, it was those aluminum seats. They rattled. It was like everybody had cymbals in their hands. It felt like the reverberation of the stands was incredible. But it was a great atmosphere, and they love their Broncos out there.
Yeah, Orange Crush defense, I think one of the ones that we don't talk about. Lyle Alzado, a lot of people remember him from the Raiders, of course, but, really out with the Broncos to start it off. Well, Coach, it's always interesting to go back and look at what we talked about before the season started. If you noticed, I started off with the AFC West because I think that one we actually did okay. It was pretty easy. We get to some of these other divisions as we go through the year. We might have been off a little bit more there. We knew Kansas City would be good. Denver, coming on strong. We'll see where the other 2 wind up. I think we did pretty good. I think we were all right there.
Yeah, well, still a long way to go. A lot can happen, but we'll look forward to checking out those other 7 divisions here as we go forward.
It sails to the far side around the 8-yard line to Hester. 20, 15, Hester 5. Oh! Touchdown Bears! 45 to the outside midfield. 45-40. The punter to beat. Windy City Flyer. Touchdown! Touchdown Bears! Now Devin Hester going to run it out at the 5, to the 10, to the 15, right 20, 25, 30. Blockers downfield. 40, 35, 30, 25, 20, 15, 10. Touchdown Bears!
Well, Coach, Devin Hester, we're going to talk situational football. We're going to dive into the dynamic kickoff here, and obviously Devin Hester, one of the best ever as a kickoff returner. He is a game changer for sure, although I think we did pretty well against him when we played him.
Well, that's because we never kicked him the ball. Don't give him any opportunities. He's a hard guy to handle. He's big and fast. A very good open field runner.
Yeah, he was an unbelievable player. I mean, statistics, crazy. He was great, and like you mentioned, just don't give him the ball.
Yeah, well, that's why he's in the Hall of Fame. And 7,000 yards on kickoff returns, 3,700 yards on punt returns, 19 touchdowns. I mean, that's a lot of production.
Yeah, great player. Obviously, Devin Hester, game changer. But coming out of last season, we would look at our Tuesday players in the kickoff return. Certainly Patterson, Turpin, a young player for Dallas right now. Those would be a couple guys that we would have come out and said, hey, we got to make sure these guys don't get a big return on us.
That's right. Either touchback them or kick away from them if you can't touchback them because of the conditions or your kicker. But, yeah, try to take the ball out of their hands. No point in giving it to them where they want it. But with Patterson, you had to kick it out of the end zone because he would take it it from 9 deep, and but he was a great kickoff returner.
Yeah, Coach Patterson, I remember one time I tried to kick this thing out the back of the end zone. He's standing 9 yards deep. I kicked it as high as we could. He jumps up in the air, tipped it to himself, caught it, and I'm pretty sure he returned it out for like another 50, 60 yards. He may have even gone to the house. So certainly a guy we got to contend with there. But some rule changes this past offseason.
Yeah, the kickoff kick return has taken a different shape this year, and this dynamic kickoff is designed to promote returns, and basically it has the return percentages are now about what they were a few years back, minus the 2023 season last year where they dipped down a little bit. And so we have a landing zone and so forth. But here we are, we're in the 40% range, a little under that. Then last year down to 22%, and now we're back up this year.
Yeah, so again, trying to promote more returns than we had in the past. Again, still trying to take into account speed and space type of plays, and they've been able to do it. I think, like you mentioned, our numbers are back up this year, the returns back up into those mid-30s, and we're seeing some interesting things with the new setup here as we watch the tape.
Right. There are some different concepts, of course. The formation's different. Here's the kickoff team, and here's the kickoff return team, and there are definitely some new strategy here that's coming on. That's why we're putting this in situational plays. This is the only touchdown return we've seen so far this year, and what a lot of teams are doing is they're putting some quick guys in there on the kickoff team to try to avoid these blockers quickly, and then putting a couple of size players in at the point of attack. Here, Buffalo kicks the ball right down the middle, so this allows the returner to pretty much hit anywhere on the field. Makes it tough to cover. We're seeing a lot more directional kicking for the teams that are covering, and here they kind of run themselves. Buffalo kind of run themselves out of the middle of the field, and have one guy coming down here, and now we've got a couple missed tackles and a long kickoff return for a touchdown.
Yeah, this is early in the year, and certainly teams are trying to figure out what other teams were going to do. And I know 100%, Coach, you would have told us, don't kick the ball down the middle of the field. Don't give it to them direct. No. And then, even worse, the coverage teams, everybody swims outside. It opens up like the Red Sea, and he takes it through the middle. But teams are learning from these plays. This was early, but this is disastrous.
It almost looks like the ball was supposed to be kicked over into this area somewhere based on the way all these guys are avoiding and trying to come this way. But that's part of the problem with covering kicks, whether it's punts or kickoffs. Where it's supposed to be kicked and where it actually goes are two different things. So, Buffalo has 5 guys over here all piled up together, and there's just too much space for the returner. And then plus you have some poor tackling here, some arm tackling and missed tackles in the first game of the season, and a long return. So that's the one that we've seen. But in the Bengals game against the Commanders, this kickoff goes to Austin Eckler, who's having a really good year for the Commanders. And I think what you're going to see on this play is just a lot of space in the coverage and great running by Eckler. He does an excellent job. He has great vision and is able to see the seams and run and get the ball into space, turn this into a long return. Really good open field running. Yeah,
the design, again, of the rule was to make this more of a line of scrimmage play. So now you have running backs out there, guys that have great vision, guys that can run with the ball to find those spaces and those seams and turn them into big returns.
All right, Cardinals kicking off to the Rams. Directional kick to the sideline. We've seen more of this where either teams are touchbacking or they're trying to kick the ball in the corner. Again, cut off the return and fold over the top from the backside. That's been a pretty popular coverage concept. You see how quickly these players from the backside are folding over the top here, and then try to get some size players over here at the point of attack. And if somebody cut off the field where they can come down here and keep the ball from getting back to the wide side of the field.
Yeah, we talk a lot offensive football, and again, trying to set up a play here about the sidewalk being the numbers, whether it's screens or outside zones that go into the boundary of hitting the numbers and then turning it upfield. Really, that's what the returner does here. He gets to the sidewalk, finds that little space, and then gets vertical, and that's where these big returns are coming. Once you get through that first line of the coverage unit, there's nobody left behind it. They can't really stack in time, and these returns become dangerous.
We're still seeing double teams on the best player here, so these inside coverage players, this is the Rams doubling the Arizona's 5, knocking him down, and getting a double team so you can get the play started and get into space. On the coverage side of things, what teams are trying to do is create twists or picks for their coverage. So in this case, Arizona, with the ball kicked over here to the right, is running a twist game here between this player, who's the number 3, and this player folding back behind him here. The Rams do a real good job. They do a real good job of just staying man-to-man on this. And so when the defenders twist, they twist with them. and just push them by the hole, and then the return is able to hit that seam there. So the timing of the play on these short kicks just is, if you don't do a good job at the point of attack like Arizona isn't doing right here, the backside has too far to go to get over and prevent the ball from getting into the seam.
Yeah, one of the backside overlap players for Arizona there, he came underneath the block, and now there's just no second level.
Still getting double teams in here. Whoever the best coverage players are, the return teams are still finding a way to get double teams on those players. In this case, do a good job here. Rams do a good job of getting the inside player on the ground, and it's a big return. New Orleans is having a pretty good year here on special teams. They do a real good job on covering the kicks. Here they are returning it with Shaheed, and really just a lot of man-to-man blocking when the defender, in this case right here inside, when the defender can beat that blocker across his face, then he's really able to come down here and shut down the whole return. So playing with good leverage and keeping these defenders out of the running lane, it's getting harder and harder as teams are doing a better job of anticipating where the ball is being kicked and also twisting to free up players on the backside. You can see how fast here Atlanta is flown over the top here. Matt, that's one of your old special teams coaches down there, right?
Yeah, Marquise Williams doing a good job of pinning these guys inside the 25. And Coach, we talked about it earlier, when you're aggressive philosophy, like the Saints, and you take that ball from deep, number one, you would always say, hey, make sure you catch it going forward if you're coming out. You don't want to catch the ball going backwards. It takes too long to get your momentum going. You allow the coverage team to get down there quicker. And number two, when you're coming from that deep, you better make sure that you can get it out, because right now, statistically, they're not getting it out very far.
No. You got to have a lot of confidence in the returner in this situation to bring the ball out of 5 yards deep this year. And statistically, those have been the weakest returns statistically, are the ones that are coming from 1 to 5 yards deep in the end zone. One of the popular strategies now is to line drive the ball so that it hits here in the landing zone. And then, as we know, football takes a lot of crazy bounces. So ball handling becomes an issue back here, getting it cleanly. And there have been some, good coverage plays in these situations where the ball's either been muffed, mishandled, or taken a crazy bounce. If you can get somebody down here to penetrate like Carolina does on this play, they're able to make the tackle inside the 20-yard line, which is really tough these days with the new kickoff rules.
Yeah, the kickers are so good nowadays. They have all their different trick kicks that they like to do. But certainly I think this is another one that they've added where it is difficult to field the ball in open space. We'll get some weather here coming up. This could be interesting with the different types of kicks we see here in the season as we go forward.
Right, and the highlight up here, you can see how quickly they twist and free guys up, get down there and make the play. So definitely some experimentation in the first third of the season with this rule. I think things are starting to settle in a little bit with more line drive kicks that force ball handling, kickoffs into the end zone for touchbacks against the really good returners, and the directional kicking style. Yeah, Matt, I think the kickoff strategy is really starting to take shape a little bit here between kicking the ball deep against really good returners and not letting them bring it out, putting the ball on the ground and making it hit the ground in that landing area so it's hard to field, or directionally kicking it outside the numbers where you can just gang up over there and pin the returner into the sideline. This is another example of that line drive kick that hits in the landing zone and then bounces around. It's tough to field there for the Giants, and it just messes up the timing of the play. It makes it hard for the returner to get a good clean catch and get his momentum and get a chance to really read the blocking on the return.
Yeah, I think we're seeing some great schemes, some great coverage, good returns. All of that has, progressed through the year. Along with that, personnel, some bigger guys out there in certain positions, some more quicker, faster guys in other positions. I think we'll keep seeing some improvement here as we go, and it'll get interesting.
Yeah, especially as the weather changes. It'll be a lot harder to touch back in certain cities outdoors. And so some of these good returners, guys like Turpin and Shaheed and guys like that, they may get more return opportunities here later in the year. Well, Matt, we're joined by Mike Lombardi now to take us through some of the college prospects. We're looking for explosive players, like everybody else in the league is, too. Right. We got any explosive players in the 25 draft, Michael?
Yeah, there's a lot of them, and everybody says, can the guy put the ball in the end zone, which is critical, right? And so I think we've got a smorgasbord. We have a couple running backs and some receivers that are explosive players that can put the ball in the end zone without a lot of help from the quarterback or from their offensive line. So let's start off with Ashton Jeanty from Boise State. Now, This guy's compact, which I think is really important. I love running backs that look like Coke machines because they're hard to tackle. You can't get your arms around them, and this kid's kind of got that. But when we roll the tape here, it's interesting, Coach. I want to hear have you ever seen a stance like this on a running back before?
No.
I mean, I've never seen that. And so it's kind of weird. He just looks like he's just waiting, like we're waiting for the referee to put the ball in play here. But clearly
he's waiting for the bus.
Yeah, exactly. So, there he is circled there. One thing about running backs is I think the most important thing for scouts to do when evaluating a running back, do they run the runs that the team runs? You don't want to take a point of entry back and put him in a zone scheme, and you don't want to take a zone scheme and see if he can. This kid, I think he can run both, any kind of runs you want to run. He's got great vision, and boy, does he have lateral quickness. And, of course, Matt, he can, it's yards after contact.
Yeah, he's got great contact balance, and like you mentioned before, you're game planning for this guy, you better really practice your tackling.
Yeah. And all this nonsense, Coach, about breakaway speed, really, I mean, that's there's too many fast guys on a field. But this guy shows really deceptive speed. He's got gear changes to him, the way he runs and the way he can stay in balance and take the hit and not go down.
Yeah, really good contact balance, and looks like he's got enough speed to make some big plays.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and he's got great vision, and he's got no arm tackles getting him on the ground. He's able to run through it. A little bit of got to worry about that ball security. I thought he had the ball out there a little bit. Matt, you noticed that, right?
Yeah, we saw that right away. We saw in the still shot that was out there. We're coming for it. You can see it. There's the ball.
That wouldn't fly.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
not going to fly. That
He
ball's
looks pretty good there against Oregon. That's a good football team.
It really is. And he was in the transfer portal, I think, for a moment, and there was a lot of teams that had him, and Boise was able to keep him. Remember, they had that coaching change up at Boise?
Right.
So they thought they were going to lose all their good players, and he ended up staying. So a good player for him. We both know Jonah Coleman from the University of Washington. He is truly a Coke machine. This kid has got a low center of gravity, and he is hard to tackle, and he can do all the one-back runs. When you watch him, he's fun. Here he's against Eastern Michigan. He doesn't need a lot of room either, Coach.
No, this kid's really got a great lower body, very thick kid, catches the ball well, and boy, he gets downhill with some power. And we're on the open field too. Very elusive guy. He looks stiff, but he's pretty elusive in space.
Yeah, and he gets on an edge. One of the things I've learned in scouting is it's not so much that Barry Sanders type elusiveness, it's get on the edge. And with his power, he's hard to tackle.
Yeah, you hit it. That power that he's running with, that leg drive, he's coming at you at a hard downhill.
Can you run that back, Michael?
Yep, sure can.
I thought he makes a nice cut in the hole here, and you can see his lateral quickness on this play.
Yeah,
Boom.
great vision. And that stiff arm strong with that lower body.
Yeah, he's not down. He's just out of bounds.
That's right. It's right. And he can build it, and he's got gears, too. He sees it and accelerates, and he doesn't mind contact. They know in the fourth quarter, he's going to, like right here. I mean, that's a whiff job right there. And he doesn't want to miss. You don't want to tackle that guy in the fourth quarter.
Or in the first quarter.
Or in the first quarter. That's right here. I think that's what happens is the more he carries the football, like in this Rutgers game, he was dynamic. And he's really good at changing direction with a burst. He's going to be a really good pro player because, as you said, Coach, he's good in the pass game. He's good in pass protection. One thing we didn't talk about with the running backs, everybody thinks running backs, when you're scouting them, is it's run, catch, block. But as you know, it's really block, run, catch. Because if you can't block, you're not being on the field.
Can't play in a passing game. Jonah's good in blitz pickup. He handles the ball well. He actually catch punts and return kickoffs. So, that was similar to Ray Rice. Ray Rice at Rutgers didn't catch any passes, didn't return any kicks, and then he got to the Ravens in the NFL and was dynamic in all those areas for the Ravens. So, I'm not saying this guy's Ray Rice, but I'm saying he has some receiving skills and some return skills that may be more evident later on.
Yeah, and I think, Matt, for you as a defense coordinator, you see a back on the field. If he's only run, you can set your defense that way. But if he's got that multidimensional skill set, it becomes harder for you to call a game.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing to figure out, especially third down, when those guys can be productive in the passing game, but they can also run the ball. 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, more and more we're seeing those runs. These guys become really hard to game plan for.
So now everybody's favorite position. I can remember the first time you walked in the Browns draft room. He walks in the Browns draft room. Of course, we had 85 5,000 receivers graded that could play in the NFL, right?
And two defensive linemen.
And two defensive linemen. So we eliminated that right away, right? So everybody wants to draft a receiver, but I think this is a really good receiving class. I mean, let's start with Isaiah Bond at the University of Texas. They just have guys that can run fast all the time. It's really impressive when we watch him. He's got good size, but his speed is really what makes a difference here.
Yeah, Worthy's fast. Coming out of there last year, this guy might be faster. I don't know. This guy's fast.
Yeah. It's funny. They just seem to find fast guys, but it's more than fast, Matt. It's playing fast too, right? The speed translates. We had Ronaldo Nehemiah when I was at the 49ers. It was an Olympic sprinter, but he never played fast, right?
Well, he did against us on that Monday night game, '84.
Yeah.
Ran about 50 yards fast in that game.
Yeah, he ran it out, ran down there. He ran it out just like this, and next thing you know, he was down. That was his claim to fame play. That was the only one he had.
Yeah, of course, figured to be against the Giants.
Nobody's going to catch this kid here. I mean, that one kid has an angle on him, and you just can't happen.
That speed is real, just like you said. That game speed is real.
Yeah. And you can't coach it. I mean, that's the one thing. And Texas does a nice job of getting him the football. One of the things we always talked about in the draft room was, can receivers run? We wanted receivers that were former running backs because they're good with the ball in their hand. And you can see that with Bond. He's really good with the ball in his hand.
Outstanding. That reverse, catch and run plays, then he can get down the field too.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a tough guy to deal with next year.
One of the big receivers at the University of Arizona is T-Mac McMillan, the big wideout. Now, this kid, I've watched him in high school because he played with the quarterback, Noah, and they were dynamic in high school, and, boy, they're dynamic in college. He's got great size. I think he has, and I don't use this lightly, I think he has rare eye-hand coordination. I mean, it's on the top level. You know, when Randy Moss would catch the ball and you would just say, like, how did he catch it? Yeah. Like, it's on that level of rare that this kid has it. And he's got, as you mentioned before, I think he's got that quickness to go along with the size. Yeah,
for a 6'5" player, he's got really good quickness and can make people miss with the ball in his hands like this, change directions, reverse his field. It's a pretty good run.
Yeah, and the acceleration, Matt, after here, I mean, I think that's really what sells you on him is, look, anybody can get open against air, right?
Right.
But here he is accelerating through it.
Yeah, now tackling becomes a problem. You're trying to deal with that. I mean, he's a big guy. There's issues, especially a guy like this where the quarterback feels he's a quarterback-friendly receiver. Throw it up to him, he'll make something happen. You might have to put 2 on this guy defensively. Yeah, he's a problem, and he's done it since the day he walked on campus at the University of Arizona. He's been productive against every level of competition. You know, here's just a simple out route. You know, no big deal. Should be an out-of-bounds play, right, Coach? But then what happens?
Should be. He's too quick. He just stops on a dime, changes directions, and puts the ball in the end zone. You know, Vince Lombardi used to say this about a lot of players when they were big. It's hard to judge quickness on big guys, and I think you're right. I think that's really one of the things here. Hard to judge his quickness because he is so big. We judge it on the little guys. We can see Barry Sanders' quickness, but those big guys, it's deceptive. That's a hell of a play. But this play here is really something, and it only can be seen from the end zone here. He's got great body control and eye-hand coordination. He just goes up and rebounds the ball. It's one thing to be 6'5", it's another thing to be 6'5", be able to jump and have great hand-eye coordination. These are the kind of plays in the red area and in tight coverage that good receivers make, great receivers make them. They go up and they get the ball. Even though they're covered and their guys on them, they go up and get the ball and take it away and rebound it. Yeah, and the quarterback's not shy at throwing the ball because it's better than a 50-50 play, right, Matt? Yeah, that's the confidence that the quarterback has in a big guy like that. And like you said, Coach, when that receiver goes up and just takes the ball away from the DBs, that's frustrating. It's frustrating really defensively. Frustrating. It's a good player offensively. Yeah, and then we're going to see his quickness here on a little snag route here coming out, boom. And then even though they have the angle on him, he can accelerate. And that balance, you see it on everything he does. That balance here to change direction, not get overextended. He's really an impressive player. You know, Marvin Harrison last year came out, big receiver, top receiver drafted last year in the 24 draft. I think this kid's quicker and better after the catch. Yeah, I think so too. And I'll tell you what, there won't be many drops with this kid. He's impressive. You know, one of the Heisman Trophy candidates this year was Luther Burden out of the University of Missouri, and they suffered a tough loss last week. A tough loss. They got their butts kicked out at Texas A&M. But he's been really a productive player for them, and you know him really well. Yeah, he had a big year last year, and you know, this year, you know, they always trying to get him going. Very good after the catch as well. as you said, kind of has some running back type qualities. You'll see it here on this play against Florida.
Yeah, nice play. I mean, he just
Hard guy to tackle.
a hard guy, strong body. You could see it, you could feel it in his body, and they just bounce off him. And that's why it's a little bit like the NBA. That's why the guys in the NBA lift weights so they can rebound and be physical in the paint. And this is why receivers need to do it too, Matt.
Yeah, watching these routes where these guys go over the middle. That's what you want to see. You want to see receivers go over the middle, stay on their feet, and turn them into big plays.
Yeah. Here he is against Georgia. And, and look, he's got his hand up. He's letting everybody know he wants it. Acceleration at the top of the route. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, this kid's got really good hands and good with the ball in his hands.
Yeah. And they've got a lot of good. You see them against really good competition, which is really important. That's the thing. The hardest thing to judge, and I go back to that story when we had all those receivers up there, is they're going against the air. It's hard to judge. Nobody plays a lot of press coverage, but when you're talking about guys in the Southeast Conference, you see that.
Well, and one of the greatest draft picks of all time, you took Jerry Rice.
Yeah.
You watch him down there, and who's he playing against?
Right.
But
yeah, we were lucky. We wanted Eddie Brown, but we took Jerry Rice. But why not? Why not? All right, the next guy. This is a transfer. Trey Harris, another big receiver with quickness. I think this kid's really impressive on tape. This kid's got a little bit of Randy Moss arm length to him too. I don't want to compare anybody to the great Randy Moss, but this kid's arm length and his size are impressive with his ability to go play with quickness like T-Mac can too.
Mm-hmm. And build speed.
Yeah.
Once he gets rolling, you just see he just separates there. And it's all over. They're not catching him.
Yeah. The other thing, too, I think we have to talk about is what routes do these guys run? Can they incorporate how many routes are you going to get out of these receivers in terms of your route tree when you draft them?
Right, and you think what you're trying to determine is what position does he really play? Is he an X? Is he an outside receiver?
Right. Can
you move him around in today's offense? And this guy's got really big, he's big, he's strong. He becomes a problem for some of those guys if you can move him around.
Yeah, this idea that everybody's a number one receiver, and you and I, all three of us know there's very few number one receivers. It's hard to be a number one receiver. It's hard to beat double coverage all the time.
Yeah, sure it is. You're on his back, Michael. This is really a good play here where you could see his run after catch. I think the real question on this guy is going to be how fast is he? I don't know if he's a 4.4 guy. He's probably more in the 4.5 range, but we'll see when he times out. But he's strong. He's got quickness. He's been very productive, of course, in that offense in Mississippi. Get a lot of opportunities, but I don't know if he's got that speed like that we saw from Bond. It's not bad. It's just I don't know if it's elite.
Yeah. But he's going to be tough to tackle, too. He's a big man, and he got good quickness in and out of his cuts. All right, the last guy we're going to talk about is a dual-purpose player. We talked about the Heisman Trophy candidate. This kid is a legitimate Heisman Trophy candidate. His stamina, to me, is remarkable. Plays corner, 45, 50 plays. Plays receiver, 45, 50 plays. He's so athletic. He can do it all. I don't know where to play him. Where would you play him, Coach?
On defense.
I know you would. That's why I asked. I knew the answer to that, Matt.
I was going to say the same thing. I mean, the offensive plays, the explosiveness, the way he gets downfield, it's great, but I'm just going to keep sliding his name back over that defensive board, get him over with us.
Yeah, I mean.
We had Marcus Jones at New England and got him in for a few plays on offense, the little bit gadget stuff, reverse, fake reverse, slip screen, things like that, run a go route, but really more of a defensive player. This kid's a little different player than Marcus, but I think same idea. I think he'll be a situational guy, maybe offensively, and really probably more of a defensive player.
Yeah, this play to me is really something we talk about all the time. This is catching the ball with your feet. You see him as he turns back, and now he just runs to a certain spot. You see his head tip?
Yeah.
That's like a great center fielder in baseball. I'm going to catch this ball. I'm going to run to it, but I don't have to keep looking at the ball. I know where the ball is going to be.
Yeah, he's digging right there, but the most amazing thing is his eye control. To be able to locate the ball, take your eyes off the ball, and then put it back up when you're running that hard, that's really difficult
That's rare.
to do.
That's really rare. I mean, this kid's impressive. His instincts, too, to play two positions. I think people confuse defensive back as a non-instinct. It's an athletic. No, it's an instinctive position.
Oh, sure. And here he's playing with a good quarterback, too. So this is a good opportunity to see a good receiver and a good quarterback play together. I missed a good throw by Sanders and, good catch there by Hunter, and he's in the end zone. So he's got somebody that can get him the ball. And, of course, that can always be challenging to evaluate a receiver when a quarterback isn't as accurate. But with Sanders, he's got a lot of opportunities, so it's good.
I always get pissed off all the time when all the mock drafts have 5 receivers going, 6 receivers, 7 in the first round. I'm like, no, let's stop that. But we just saw some really good receivers that are going to be high draft picks.
It'll be interesting to follow up on some of these guys a little bit later in the year. And, of course, once we get to the Indy Times and see what some of them run, that'll be interesting, too. I think Bond's going to have a good time at Indy.
Yeah, I think he will, too. And the running back, the value in the running back position, but those two running backs we watched today, they're going to help some team win a lot of games next year.
They sure will.
Well, we had to call an audible because there was big news this week. And after week 5, an NFL head coach losing his job is big news. Robert Saleh was fired by Woody Johnson, the owner of the Jets, on a Tuesday morning when he was getting ready to game plan for his Monday night game against Buffalo. And it doesn't come as a surprise that Saleh lost his job. I thought the timing was what a surprise in this instance because only 5 games into the season, a lot of football left to play. If you didn't like Saleh after 5 games, why did you like him after last season?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That'd be a good question for the Jets decision makers, whoever that was. I'm not sure if that was Joe Douglas or Woody or whoever. But yeah, it is a little bit puzzling. It is what it is, and everybody has to move forward. It's the owner's prerogative to make that decision, and clearly that's what he decided to do. But there have been a lot of things that have been kind of confusing, and it hasn't been a great situation at the Jets this year. You can kind of feel there's been kind of a chill.
It seems like everybody goes to the podium for the Jets, and I'm taking Rodgers out of this because he speaks quite often, but every player talks about a lack of accountability in the building. And to me, that just resonates as their culture doesn't have accountability in it. And that starts and ends with the head coach, right, Matt? I mean, I think that's his job. The whole player's accountable. And they're screaming for accountability. It's a funny world we live in. Nobody wants accountability, but when there's no accountability, everybody wants it.
Yeah, as a head coach, look, you're in charge of the team and the organization and making sure that it's moving in the direction that ownership and everybody down wants it to go in. I think to the point, this is a hard week. They just got back from being overseas, and the organization is trying to just, not recover, but get their feet back under them, kind of get it in a normal rhythm. They got a Monday night game. They're going to come off to another short week. The timing is really hard, I think, for the organization, and they're going to have to regroup pretty quick and pull together and try to, push forward.
Well, you mentioned overseas. There was a play in the London game when Rodgers got hurt, and you noticed this, that where Robert Saleh comes on the field, and I think we can roll the tape here, that I think really tells a lot here, right, Coach? I mean, he comes over, Rodgers is hurt, but he turns his back to him and doesn't even ask how Rodgers is doing. Now, he's talking to the trainer who covers up his mouth, but you'd think there'd be more of an interaction, there'd be more of a kind of a chemistry. It looked a little bit of an indifferent flavor there.
Yeah, there was kind of a bad look on that play. It seemed like he had a lot of concern for the quarterback. Not trying to read too much into it, but Rodgers just took a pretty good shot there. So, that's a tough situation. It really is. But I think when you look at the Jets over the last decade, back to Rex Ryan, Mangini and Adam Gase, and now there hasn't been a lot of success.
Right.
There really hasn't been a lot of success.
Well, I mean, we go back, and it's a 34% win percentage since Rex Ryan left. That includes Todd Bowles, Adam Gase, and of course Robert Saleh. It also includes Mike McCagan, the former general manager who got fired too, and now Joe Douglas, who's in the last year of a 6-year contract, who was brought in 2019. So this organization's last playoff win was 2010. Last playoff appearance was 2010. They lost to Pittsburgh 24-19 in that divisional game, and everything's been downhill for the last 15 years.
I think, we talked about in the offseason, even before the season got going this year, it was a tough spring for them too. There was some communication there between the head coach and the quarterback, and whatever that was in the media, that became another story. And it feels like through that span, Mike, that you just talked about, there's always just another story. There's just another distraction. There's something other than just, maybe pushing ahead to try to win football games that comes up and maybe gets in the way. And I think that's tough to navigate as a head coach, and certainly, the GM, but the owner, wasn't happy and wanted to go in a different direction.
Some of the personnel acquisitions and the Reddick trade, the offensive line situation, Elijah Moore, bringing in the Packers receivers. There are really just a lot of things that haven't worked out. It hasn't all been the coach. Certainly there's ownership, the personnel department, and just to say an overall culture. Watching Hard Knocks from a year ago, that there were a lot of things that just didn't look quite right there.
And it didn't look like they fixed it. I mean, Saleh entered the year as the favorite to win Coach of the Year, believe it or not, because everybody thought on paper that this team really had the makings of going places. And it may still go there with Jeff Albright as the new head coach, but to me, it didn't appear that they corrected any of their offseason problems. I mean, they discussed bringing Arthur Smith in to be the offensive consultant. 2, they didn't want to fire Nathaniel Hackett, but they recognized there was a problem offensively. They don't do. Arthur Smith decided, I don't want to go into that mess. I'm going to go to Pittsburgh. Probably a really smart decision on his part. But to me, they never addressed it. It seems like they knew they had problems, and they just ignored it like they were going to go away.
Right, and then some issues on the offensive line where it didn't work out with Becton. A couple tackles that we'll see how that works out. Just not a lot of protection. Certainly, Rodgers had a tough day out there in London this weekend, and so there's some issues there. They've overall played pretty good defense over the last few years. Like, that's been a pretty solid group, but the rest of the organization, just some of the appearance of dysfunctionality has been tough, and that's the ownership, that's personnel, that's coaching. Where exactly that falls, I'm not sure, but it just hasn't looked good.
Yeah, I agree. I think they'll probably take a deep dive, when the season's over. From the top down, you mentioned it, ownership, some changes and fluctuations there through the last several years. Not, changing ownership, but who's in the building, who's not in the building, that can have an effect on the overall culture too. So I think, it's a tough day for the Jets, certainly in the building. There's a lot of people in that building that, come to work, and that security is kind of up in the air, and that's really hard. And Robert Saleh, he's a good guy. He's, works hard. He's a great football mind. He's certainly a good coach. We know that. It just, sometimes these things are real difficult. They don't work out the way you want them to. But I think what we've talked about is just the Jets for last 10 years or whatever it has been since they've been to the playoffs. They've just struggled to get back there. They just can't seem to get over the hump and get back there.
Right. I think part of, and this is what we relied on you when we all worked together in New England, was you were the chief figure-out officer, right? So when there were problems, you figured it out. I mean, all of us would give you information and say, this is what we think, this is what we should do. But you were aware of the problems, and you took input from everybody, but then you solved the problems in the way you wanted to solve them. And to me, the way the Jets are set up organizationally, they don't have a problem solver. It wasn't Saleh, because he wasn't solving any problems, and it's not going to be Jeff Albright because he won't have the authority. To me, it's really hard on the coach if you don't have somebody in the building who can, A, recognize the problem, and B, have the authority to then solve the problem.
Right. There's got to be leadership in the building, wherever that comes from, and somebody has to answer to everybody else at some point, whoever that is, head coach, general manager, owner, president, whoever it happens to be, however it's structured. Somebody's got to have the final say. Somebody's got to provide some leadership and direction. Not sure who that is at the Jets. I'm really not.
I get the sense it's really the owner. I really do. And I mean, and that's fine. He owns the team. He can do anything he wants to do. But to me, they're late to recognize problems. I mean, we haven't even brought up the Hassan Riddick fiasco that they trade away a third-round pick in 2026, and the guy hasn't even showed up on campus. I mean, Saleh and him have never met. Think about that. They haven't even had a handshake.
Yeah.
And so now he's gone. You've given away a draft pick. To me, it speaks to the lack of everybody wants a collaborative effort, but somebody has to identify the problems, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's going to be real interesting going forward. Like we mentioned earlier, it's real early in the year for this. There's a lot of football left. How do they handle it inside the building? And then the players, a lot of it's going to fall on them. I think Aaron Rodgers obviously will pull the offense together. We know C.J. Mosley's a great player on defense, and he's a great leader. So we know where that leadership will be in the player part of it. It'll just be interesting to see how the rest of it comes together.
So let's spin it forward. So Jeff Albright takes over. He's got the Monday night game, a division rival. He goes to Buffalo to have to face them. The team just gets back from London. I mean, now he's got to take his role from calling the defense to being the head coach, which I'm sure he'll still call the defense, right? I mean, they're losing one guy on the sideline, but they really. How does Albright handle all those situations that he's really never been accustomed to, and he's being thrown right into the fire?
All right, well, that's a question that'll have to be answered internally, and I don't think any of us know how that'll go, but I would say hopefully they had the answers to those questions before they made the move. There's been a little bit of ready, fire, aim in New York, and
no question.
I hope this isn't another one.
Well, you don't have a 34% win percentage because you got all the answers. Let's be honest. I mean, let's just be fair here. And I know people are going to say, well, there are 3 Patriots taking heat at the Jets. But look, the record is what the record is. We can't defend them. I mean, it's hard to say. They haven't been able to really get out of their own way. And this year, they had so much hope and promise. I mean, last year they didn't want to train, didn't want to do much stuff. They wanted to take it easy on the team. They had the injury excuses, right? This year, it was a harder camp. I mean, all we read about this summer was how ready they were for the opening game, and then they go out in San Francisco and lay an egg. So I think, to me, the biggest issue is I stand back and look at it from a general manager's point of view is this isn't players, coaches, and scheme. This is cultural. This is cultural within the building, and until they fix the building, but there's no magic wand that's going to change it.
Yeah, that's right. It'd be a total organizational effort, which it's probably been for the last decade. Again, that record is more than the coach, more than the general manager and the personnel department, more than the owner. I mean, there's got to be some accountability all the way across the board.
Yeah, and the owner, we all know owners never seem to be accountable. I mean, that's why they own the team. They can do whatever they want to do, and they have every right to do it. But I feel bad. I mean, Jet fans are probably wondering what's next.
The Jet fans, as much as they got on me for a long time, I still respect the Jet fans for their passion for the team, even though it hasn't had a great run here lately.
It doesn't deter them, though. They're optimistic as hell, right?
They're always optimistic. They're very vocal. They're very, very passionate, and they have that base. They have that support. If they can just maybe figure it out here and get it going a little bit, like those fans are there now. When they're winning 34%. When they're winning 64%, I mean, that place will be unbearable. It will be unbearable.
I got a guy on Twitter who can't wait. I mean, one positive thing is I get 5 direct messages on Twitter from him, and one negative thing, but they can come back to life quickly. I mean, they can come back to life. I mean, they beat Buffalo. Albrecht might be the mayor of New York after this is over with, right?
He might be.
I'm sure Fireman Ed is someplace right now trying to figure out what are we going to do. I'm sure, look, there'll be a lot written here in the next couple weeks about it, and it'll be interesting to see how the team and the organization handles it. You feel, like you said, you feel bad for Coach Saleh, but I think they've got problems and everything that they need to look at internally, and they got to really have a good plan to fix it.
It's really hard, and we've all had this situation where the interim coach comes in, and the players, it's almost, is he a substitute teacher or is he going to be the full-time teacher? And that becomes really hard for everybody in the organization. You're going to get a spike initially, but when you get into hard times, then all of a sudden, now is he coming back? We're not sure. Who do I report to? And the other thing I think that's fair to acknowledge for Saleh is when you fire the head coach, you're basically saying he was the problem.
Right.
And we know the Jets have more than just a head coaching problem.
We know that.
Yeah. As we spin this forward, we've all had experiences in terms of the interim coach comes in. I know from my experience it's challenging because, the players feel like, now they're really not accountable. Now accountability, and it's a tough job for the new head coach because he wants to change things. He wants to do things his way, and he's not sure whether his way is going to be able to be supported by the ownership because he's on an interim basis. And there's really only been 2. I think Jeff Fisher, when he took over down in Houston, he was promised a head coaching job, so he had some clout. But Doug Marrone wasn't, and he got the head coaching job, and he was successful. Jason Garrett the same way. He wasn't promised, but he became the head coach, and they've had longevity. But most of the time when interim coaches take over, they stay in the job, and then a year later or 2 years later, they're out of work too.
Well, look, for the players, when you change coaches, you change a lot of players. You get into a new system, you get into a new scheme, and sure, the great players can play for anybody, but then the system players and the scheme players will go to somewhere else when the scheme and the coaches change. So a lot of the players here they're on thin ice too, depending on who the new coach is going to be. But I would say right now there's probably a lot of uneasiness in the organization, and I know that when I've been in a situation similar to this, we moved the team in Cleveland in the middle of the '95 season. You think about yourself, but you think about everybody that's depending on you as the head coach. All your assistant coaches, other people that you've brought that are in the organization that support, whether it be operations, training, medical, film, video, etc. All those things. The people that really rely on you for their job security. Now, if there's somebody else coming in, that could change their lives too, and their families. It's not just that person, but also the other 4 or 5, however many people that are in their family that you just feel a lot of responsibility for, and it's tough. It weighs on you. I know we've all been through this, but it's not easy. And so Coach Saleh has got a tough situation, but everybody else is they don't have much either. I don't care what their contract situation is. They don't have much security either because nobody really knows how this is going to go. And honestly, it won't be decided until probably mid-January after the whole interview process is going through as the league has dictated as part of the policy. After all that's done, then eventually, whenever the new coach is hired, that'll be probably a couple weeks after the regular season ends. So there's a long, I would say, period of uncertainty ahead.
Yeah, I think there's no question. And that uncertainty, Bill Walsh in his great book talks a lot about this, where, when that uncertainty, everybody's worried about their next job. And instead of worrying about who the next opponent is, it takes a mentally tough person to be able to sit in your room and not think about 5 weeks down the road and focus on Buffalo when that 5 weeks down the road we might all be out of work.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you have to think about in those situations, not only at work, but then at home. I'm sure when you go home, you're going to have those conversations around the dinner table, and there's going to be concern. And, look, we love this sport. It's the greatest sport in the entire world. But when things like this happen, it affects people, affects families. Like you mentioned, Coach, like as the head coach, when you're in that situation, obviously I was too. Number one, the blame, it's you, and that's what you do as a head coach. You accept all that. But your concern, really, first and foremost, is for everybody that you hired. You look around, you said, we brought all these people here, we brought families here, we obviously were excited. It's a dream come true. Now you bring the families there, and you're looking at not only your own kids and your wife, but you're looking at the kids of your friends. We're a very close-knit family as coaches and players. You've brought players maybe that have come with you that are systematic players, like you mentioned, that are there to try to help turn whatever it is, culture or scheme. And you're looking at their families, you're looking at their wives and their kids and saying, man, I let everybody down. How do I help now? And you go in that mode where you're really just trying to make sure everybody's okay. And I think that's what you got to do, is make sure everybody's okay. And so right now at the Jets, there's a building of uncertainty. And I'm sure Coach Saleh is, his first and foremost, he wants to make sure everybody in the building is okay. But then another 5 months down the road, there's going to be a lot of phone calls, and you're going to want to try to help people get jobs. Coach Saleh is a great coach. He's done a great job. Yeah. He's a great defensive coach. We know that. His record proves that. Like all of us that have been in those situations, like it didn't work out. We don't go into the job not wanting it to work out. We're doing everything we can to have it work out, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. But he's a great coach. But I think his responsibility and what he's going to feel is that when that hiring cycle comes, he's going to try to get those coaches jobs. He's going to make sure to call all the coaches that he knows and say, hey, these are good coaches. That didn't work out. That was my fault. These are really good coaches. Some of them may be able to stay, and continue on with whatever the next regime is. But it's personal. You have your kids have to go to school. Yeah. We know how that is too. That's really hard. And for the players and the coaches that have to go home at night, they're going to have to deal and listen to their kids and see how that is and make sure they're safe. That's real too. Sometimes it's not safe situations. We've both been in those where now the police got to come stay at the house and they got to make sure everything's secure there because threats are real. It's kind of crazy, and that happens, and your kids have to grow up fast in those scenarios for sure. But that's hard. I think it's hard on the coaches. It's hard when that happens. And, certainly guys like Coach Saleh and us, when we've been in those, we take that and we take the responsibility for it, but we want to make sure everybody's okay in those situations.
Your mental health, too, is hard. I know I went from, we were together in Cleveland, I went from, this 20-hour day, to picking up Matthew in the kindergarten line, like all of a sudden, wait a minute, what just happened here? Your world just goes completely, and I think the hardest thing to do is to keep bitterness out of your life, because you get so bitter about why you didn't get a chance to finish the job. I got 1 year in Cleveland as a general manager, and then you get fired for, you're not sure why, 1 year, but that's just, as we've said, it's the business we've chosen. And I think Robert's going to have to really do a good job of mentally staying sharp with it, because these are things where if you get the bitterness inside of you, it can affect your next job.
Right, and really the best thing you can do is, for better or for worse, take the experience, learn from it, and figure out what you could have done better, or maybe what you would do in a different situation, understand what the issues were that you could learn from, and if you get another opportunity, take advantage of it, or decide who you're going to learn from to help, just become a better person, a better coach, and whatever that is. And I know for me, after leaving Cleveland, working for Coach Parcells was really refreshing in a lot of ways, because Coach Parcells had a good way of doing things and handling things, and it kind of gave me a chance to sit back and watch him do it, having been in that seat. Whereas before, when I was at the Giants, I just had never been a head coach, and so I learned a lot more that way, and learned that there were some mistakes that I made at Cleveland that I think I did a better job of in the next opportunity. So that was good. Although I would say moving a team in the middle of the year in Cleveland and then making a decision about the staff in February was a very trying period. But in the end, we all survived, and you learn from the experiences that you go through.
Yeah.
I remember, just obviously my last year in Detroit, we're creatures of habit. So, you get up in the morning, you were in New England. We were actually going through COVID, so
Right.
we had a
Yes.
lot going on just as a head coach trying to figure out schedules and safety and rule changes and everything that, we had to deal with COVID so that we could put the product on the field. And, you'd get up, you'd call me at 5 a.m. and we'd talk on your ride in. And it was just great for me to have that sounding board from you every single day going to work because, you were sharing some of your experiences from Cleveland. I was going through a lot of the same things at Detroit. It's hard, you're in that mode. Mike, you said it, you're like, hey, I'm really trying here. I'm trying to pull this together. It just didn't work out. And then, that happens, you get fired, you get let go. Your friends check on you, which is great, but you go through a process of, okay, let me really sit down and really take a good look at myself. What did I do wrong? Let me make sure the families are good. Let me make sure my family's okay, number one. Let me make sure the families of the people that I hired, make sure they're okay, the players. But what did I fail? I obviously, look, we're in the NFL and we were able to ascend to those, levels of whether head coach, GM, and have success that we've had because we've been knocked down, but we get back up. And this is one of those really great learning moments, I think, that, we got knocked down as a head coach. Most of the league has, I think that's the thing about it is you sit there and like, well, I can't believe I failed at this where, look, there's a lot of great coaches in this league that have been fired. That's just, you join kind of a little bit of a fraternity there. But you take a good look at what you did, and I think you really take that time to grow and say, hey, you know what? I wasn't my best year, and I think I certainly know that. My first year at Detroit was not my best year coaching. I've been coaching for a long time, and you know what? They're not all going to be perfect. I know that, in the first year, and that's not good to start off that way for sure. You don't get a long ladder if you do it that way, but, you learn, you grow, you become better. And then, as you mentioned, it was great to be able to come back home, go back to New England in a place where I was comfortable and I knew I could kind of sit back, and we had a lot of long, great conversations about my experience. And then, to your point, we kind of still were in COVID. I had sat in the head coach seat. Remember, we had to split the squad meetings because of the size. And, you just looked at me and said, look, you're going to have one of the squad meetings. You run that. I'm going to run the other one to try to get ready for our day because we're still trying to keep the players separated and safe at that point. But that was a great reset for me to be able to go back there, come home. That was obviously where my wife was from and my kids were born, and kind of reset and try to grow again as a coach, which, look, this happens. Coach Saleh, he's down right now, but he's going to pick himself back up, and that's what you try to do in these moments.
I always tell people this all the time. I think, you can't let bitterness come in your life, and I think you have to, you're going to get, today he's probably got 1,000 texts on his phone.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to, but most of those texts want to find out what happened.
Yeah.
And then second week, you're probably going to get 500 texts. And those people, there's some of them mean good well, but your true friends text you still the third week. And those are the people that you're going to really rely on. And those are the ones that are going to check on you and try to see to make sure that you're okay and helping your staff. And I think that's the hard part is this is the entertainment business, right? We all know that. This is what it is. And,
that's what it is.
And everybody wants to get that next big job. And you can't get mad at the person who gets the next big job or else it affects you and your job.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of be disciplined enough to work on getting better, and I think that's the challenge. Look, Robert Saleh can look at it. You can say, well, he wasn't a good head coach, but, Todd Bowles is having success down in Tampa. Yeah. He was fired from the Jets, right? Yeah. We saw Adam Gase wasn't, we saw that he struggled, so other coaches have struggled. Look, the two best players in the comeback players of the year the last 2 years, Joe Flacco, right, and Geno Smith are former Jet players, and this year Sam Darnold might be. So, getting fired from the Jets may not be the worst thing of all. I think you have to be honest about that because, again, I think it's more of the operating system there than it is casting a shadow on your talent because you obviously don't have the ability to run a team. You
mentioned something that I think that's really kind of key too is, when you get through that situation and you grow and you kind of stand up and say, okay, hey, look, I accept I got to do better. I think everyone thinks you're bitter about the situation, but those cities that we left, like, I hope they do well. Like those fans, like you go there and you're trying to win for the fans, you're trying to do everything you can. Like you want those fans to feel that, and so you actually feel good when whether there's staff that you've left behind there that have had an opportunity to stay on and grow and have success, or whoever comes in, like you mentioned, like hey, they're just taking a job, they're taking an open job. You can't tie that together, and you got to feel good about them, and that'll be the same situation I'm sure for Robert in New York.
So at the end of the day, what's next for the Jets?
Well, Michael, that's a good question. I can only go from personal experience. In 1976, I went to the Lions. It was my first year with the Lions, and the coach who hired me there, Coach Frisano, who was a very close personal friend of mine, resigned or was forced out in the middle of the season after the 5th game. Not even the middle of the season, early in the season. The personnel director, Tommy Hudspeth, took over as the head coach. And certainly for me, it was very hard to see Coach Verzano not be there. But still, there was a lot of football left to be played, and we all had a job to do, even though it was under different leadership. And at that time, we played, the next game was against the New England Patriots, ironically. And they were the best team in the league. They had won a couple games by like 4 touchdowns, and they were rolling. And the Lions at that point looked like the worst team in the league, and it looked like a pretty big mismatch. That week was a little bit of a fresh start. You know, you have a poor record, you get a little bit of a fresh start, new coach, and offensively, we put in a formation. We had a very good tight end, a Hall of Fame tight end, Charlie Sanders, and we had another rookie tight end, David Hill, and we put in a formation where we used both tight ends on the line of scrimmage instead of the traditional 2-back set. And I had only seen that one time really before, and that was in the 1974 playoff game between the Rams and the Redskins, when the Rams absolutely tore the Redskins apart with that formation, because at that time, the Redskins really couldn't figure out what was the strong side, what was the weak side, because it was a perfectly balanced formation with that second tight end in the game. And so we went into that formation, and the Patriots had a lot of trouble with it. They had never seen it before. They had a lot of trouble with it, and we were able to check the play at the line of scrimmage based on where they rotated and what they were doing, and actually won the game pretty handily. It was the biggest upset of the year, honestly, because nobody expected it to be competitive. And the New England people, even to this day, that game is referred to in the New England terminology from Coach Earhart and all the coaches that were up there as Detroit formation.
Is that how it happened?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's Detroit from 1976.
I didn't
David
know
Hill
that.
and Charlie Sanders.
I didn't know why we called it Detroit.
And when they rotated to Sanders,
Yep.
we came out to Hill. And when they rotated to Hill, we came out to Sanders. And when they went too deep to rotate to both of them, we ran either Hill or Sanders down the middle and split the defense. And they were in a 3-4 defense at that time. So it's been Detroit ever since then. And of course, the variations of Detroit, like piston and wheels and Motown and all those other Detroit terms are just Detroit terms. And so it was a great experience for me as a young coach, second year in the league, to see the change, the transition. It didn't end up as a great year that year, but that particular week was just different from, honestly, any other week that I've experienced in the National Football League in almost 50 years. So you never know.
Yeah.
You never know how it's going to go.
You tell that story every time we would play Detroit. For 4 months, our offense would be yelling Detroit personnel, and really no one knows why. And then we'd play Detroit, and you'd tell that story, which is unbelievable. That's a great story. It's a great piece of history of the game that came out of a really tough situation.
Yeah, Ken Shipp was the offensive coordinator. Joe Bugle was the offensive line coach. I coached the tight ends that year, which was blessing Charlie Sanders and David Hill. These are 2 great tight ends. And we talked about changing the formation, being able to get both guys on the field at the same time, which, again, at that point in time, just didn't happen. Everything was 2 backs, a tight end, and 2 receivers. You just didn't have any other formations. But it worked out, and it was one of the formations that we used later in that year, and obviously became a very popular formation later on. And Coach Gibbs and Coach Coryell and all that, and some of their 1-back, 2 tight end offenses. And now it's probably the second most popular formation in the NFL. But at that point in time, it was new, and it worked, and everybody kind of got a little bit of a spark and a lift, and it sort of carried us through the rest of the season. So you just never know.
You never know. And as the great Albert Einstein says, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity, and there's great opportunity. I mean, as much as everybody feels bad for Robert losing his job, but there is opportunity, and I think you have to take advantage of it in a difficult time.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Coach will do a good job of reflecting on the positives and the negatives. And as we said, he's a good coach. He didn't get that job because he's not a good coach.
Right.
He got it because he is a good coach, and he had a lot of success. And I'm sure that when he gets another opportunity, he'll be maybe a little bit better prepared to handle it. And look at what Coach Bowles has done down in Tampa. I mean, he's done a fantastic job down there. And
Dan Quinn's at Washington.
Dan Quinn,
Pete Carroll left. The list goes on. So.
Yeah,
Right.
and
there's no head coaching school. That's the reality of it. That's the hard thing. And when you get how long did it take you before you got your first head coaching interview? I mean, now these guys are in the league 3 years. They're getting head coaching interviews. So the level of experience you're going into the job with is a lot less than it was in the past. And I don't want to be the old guy on the lawn, but still, the reality of it is you got to have that kind of experience, because that job, as you can speak to as the only one, and you too, Matt, is there's problems that you don't even recognize or you even thought of that you come on your desk that you didn't think were going to happen.
Yeah, that's why it's so critical that you have another person with you, like you were at Cleveland, Scott Pioli and Nick Caserio, and you were in New England, and having somebody, it's too much for one person. It just is. So you need a general manager and a personnel person. You need a coach. You need to work together. You need to be on the same page. You need to solve problems together on the team.
Yeah.
It's not one or the other. It needs to be a combination effort, and that's why we've had such great partnerships through the years. You had that teamwork that fits together. Not sure where it was exactly with the Jets, with Douglas and Robert and ownership and so forth, but again, I think after a decade of where they've been, 4% winning percentage, whatever it was, it's time to kind of figure out, hey, we need a better plan, a better format, a better blueprint than what we've had.
Yeah, it's not about just hire people. It's about how do we fix the culture. And I think that speaks. When you have 10 years of 34% win percentage, it's not about we need a better right guard, or we need a better left tackle, or we better get a better offensive coach in here. We better get an operating system that can operate and sustain success. It goes back to the Coach Walsh saying we're only competing against 8 teams when there were 28 teams, because he knew very few teams had operating systems. He knew that all those teams weren't. And if you can't figure that out, which for the life of me, as we sit here, it's the most remarkable story of all, that it takes culture to win, but nobody wants to put a culture in.
Yeah, I think we spend a lot of time in developing that culture, but sometimes you're just not given the time to do it.
We all know that culture is such an important part of an organization all the way through. And honestly, that's what I love about being at this table with you two guys.
Yeah.
Just our culture, just being able to talk football, to talk about whatever it is, whether it's offense, defense, special teams, draft, building a team, accountability, teamwork. It's just a great culture. And when everybody's, pretty much on the same page, has the same vision, has the same passion, and wants to work at it, it's just so much fun to be around and do. And I can't thank you guys enough for all the times that we've had together through the years. When you think about culture, I think about how lucky I've been to be part of it. And I kind of see in the Jets organization, you just kind of tell it's not there. And so I've been really lucky to have guys, people like you. But for this show, for you guys to be here, I appreciate it.
I think we've been lucky too, right? And I think, to me, I don't want to speak for Matt, but for me, I can't really survive in any other culture but this. That's the one thing I've learned through my failures is I need this, whether it's doing this TV show or being in the NFL or doing anything, is that this culture that I learned from you and how to behave and how to act and how to think is really the way, it's become a way of life. It's become my operating system, and without it, it's really no fun. Yeah,
Josh McDaniels and I had a great conversation one time just about working together and being around each other, and then when we weren't, and really, came back to, Coach, what you established for us. And honestly, we both kind of looked at each other and said, we've just been spoiled. We've just really been spoiled.
Yeah.
We've been in the think tank of football, for 20 plus years, where at the highest level, you've pushed all of us, all, facets of the organization to really think beyond the game. And, look, having an opportunity to come sit and talk football like we've done for so many years, but to do that every single week in person, talk about the game, it's special, it's great, I love it, I'm excited for it every week, and I know we're so appreciative for you to pull all this together for us.
Well, we'll be back to talk about it again next week.
Thank you for joining us. Please make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to the Coach Channel.